Good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to be here and thrilled to have an opportunity to make this presentation. And thank you so much for asking me. I would like to start by, of course, as has been done previously, acknowledging all the indigenous groups in Florida. And I appreciate you all acknowledging the Geechee people. We remember that we are living on their land and we are prospering from their existence and their sacrifice. I'm also going to be scrolling through these images of members of my family, my ancestors. And at the end, I'd ask that we could just take a few moments of silence as I remember. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Well, my journey into a deeper exploration of archaeology began with meeting this young lady on the left. And this was immediately after I returned from Wisconsin to Nassau County. I had heard about a coastal walk, and for some reason I felt compelled to attend. And this was moments after we had gathered inside and decided to prepare to go outside to take our walk at Fort Clinch on Amelia Island. And that was an experience that I had no idea would lead to so many elements of what was to come. It was an introduction to some of the elements of what I would come to know as heritage stewardship. This is my paperwork of documentation of the notes from the survey that they did for us. As you can see, now these questions are quite a foreshadowing. What are the threats facing the coastal heritage? If we can't take action at every site, how should we decide which ones to prioritize? Causing me to have to think about these issues before I ever really realized that I would need them. And then later on, we met up again several months later in St. Augustine for one of the crypt workshops. And this will give you a look at the before and after of one of the headstone restorations. But again, this was an opportunity to network and meet with people who have the same interest in preserving cemeteries. In this case, specifically, Gullah Geechee Cemetery in St. Augustine. Whenever we see a bulldozer, it's sort of a trigger. It sort of sets off shock waves because we don't really know what is going to happen and how we're going to be impacted. This is Queen Quet and my co-representative, William Jefferson, surveying some property that is near Gullah Geechee community. And at the time that this was being done, we actually had access. Now the access is locked and blocked because they were working on a stormwater drainage pond. So there is a huge hole there now. The work that we do in Nassau County, we've been very blessed to have the opportunity to do what we call community engaged research. And students come in this case from the University of Minnesota. We had 2 cohorts of students who came physically to be with us and conduct research. And then during COVID, we've had a cohort that we work with virtually. This is just one of the pages from a newsletter that I put out, a brochure just to tell the community what we had done. These are the students from all of the cohorts. And you'll see the article there that highlights the fact that we were out surveying the area of the Gullah Geechee burial ground. And I'll tell you some more about that as we move on through. Just a little bit about Florida and some of the backstory so you'll know what the life of Gullah Geechee people has been in Florida, particularly post-enslavement. Of course, you know that Florida is a huge tourism location. That goes without saying. Unfortunately, Florida was also the site of many, many lynchings, probably rivaling some of the most treacherous in the nation. Here I'm sharing a little bit about Red Summer and all of the Black communities that were terrorized at that time. And that era, around the 1900s, is when the turpentine industry became so important. Turpentine, pine, sawmills, and this is a sheet, one of the slides from a story map that it hasn't gone live yet, but that's one of the projects that the students from University of Minnesota worked on with us. And we're just talking here about as plantation agriculture ended, then we had the turpentine and sawmill industry. And that is where my people spent a lot of their time in the woods, in work camps, these turpentine and sawmill camps. And it was interesting that the young lady from North Carolina presented before me, because many of the people here in Nassau County are descendants of Gullah Geechees in North Carolina who actually moved here so that they could take advantage of the turpentine industry and all of that, and the railroad and so forth. We're seeing here some archival images of Gullah Geechee workers drying pine cones. And this is, of course, the process of getting turpentine from pine trees. That pot is known as a hurdy pot, and this is one of our community members holding the hurdy pot that belonged to one of his ancestors who worked in the local turpentine industry. As we moved post this period of working in the woods, we moved out of that industry because pine and turpentine, those industries got bought out here in Nassau County by one of our large mills. They were privately owned, and then a company came here known as Rainier, and they purchased many of those privately owned lands. If you understand that Gullah Geechee people were living and working in the same places, as you heard in the previous presentation, often we had no choice about where we lived. And so we lived where we worked, we worshiped where we worked, and we buried where we worked. In our case, we buried on land that did not belong to us. And even though we would go on perhaps to purchase properties or have properties deeded to us, many times the burial areas themselves were not deeded to us. And there was no ownership around those burial areas designated by deed. Just a little bit more about what influences displacement. As you can see, the population in Nassau County of Gullah Geechee people really had only a small blip there around the beginning of the 19-teens, it looks like early 1900s, before it just basically began to flatline. And we have maintained that until now. We're at 6% of the population. And this makes maintaining our cultural resources and our cultural heritage all the more difficult, because there are so few numbers that we become even more marginalized in terms of people's interest in our heritage and our history, which is one of the reasons that meeting Sarah and becoming aware that FPAN existed has been a phenomenal part of our ability to protect these sites. And I'm so glad that I decided to get up on was it a Saturday morning? early after my flight in to go to the Heritage Walk. The previous slide was looking at how the interstate highway system, again, is creating a situation that begins to threaten the sustainability of our culture, because you have these highways which are cutting through, in many cases, through our communities. And if they're not directly cutting through, they're having tributary roads such as State Road 200, which is one of the arteries of Interstate 95 that have come through our community multiple times as the highway is expanded. I mentioned earlier these poles that are also associated with the expansion of the highway. These drainage pond areas are now becoming routine with any type of infrastructure. And this one divided literally a community of Gullah Geechee people that had been settled for, since the early 1900s. These are the members of the Harbor Chapel Baptist Church, which is located in what was known during that turpentine period as Piney. And these are photos I took several years ago as they were enjoying a holiday cookout. And I wanted to share that this community is the place where we're seeing the need to protect our burial areas come full force. I was told by them many years ago that there was a burial area behind their church. I didn't know Sarah. I didn't know FPAN existed. I didn't know that there was anything I could do other than hope that it would not be disturbed. I wasn't certain that it was on private property. I had attempted to get help in making sure that maybe someone could come and help us find it. None of that came to fruition. However, I received a phone call October 2020 saying they've taken down all the trees. And this was from an elder who let me know that all of the trees behind the church from State Road 200 on back had been cleared, and that the burial ground was in danger. Well, I began to write emails to the county. I did know the statute regarding burial grounds. I cited that, and by God's grace, we were able to get the work halted until a determination could be made regarding the location of the burial ground. Sarah was kind enough to come out on the day that an archaeologist was there to conduct interviews with descendants of people who had been buried there. We estimate the period of the burial ground to be from, again, the period of those turpentine camps between 1918 or so up until the 1950s. I will say that one of the terms that I struggle with and is difficult for me is the word abandoned. And I say that because how can you abandon something if you don't know it's there? And the elder who reported that the burial ground was there was a child at the time that burials were being done, and only really recalled that it was there because her elders had told her. So I think the word abandoned cemetery can really only apply if the generation who is alive when the burials are happening are still there. And in most cases, they have passed on. And so I think neglected cemeteries would more likely be an appropriate term. But at any rate, I understand why that term is used, abandoned. But Sarah did a 360. It's going to go pretty fast, so I'll share it with you. You'll see the church there. and on around. So this area, just to give you again context, is near the interstate, less than a mile from Interstate 95. There's a great deal of development that's happening in that area. And this particular development is going to be a grocery store shopping chain. We are currently at a standstill with respect to what else is going to happen to protect the burial area. I was called out with our elder to make sure that there was a buffer and that the area was capped. However, we were told that there would be a deed that would convey the particular area around the burial area to the church or another Gullah Geechee concerned organization so that it would be undisturbed in perpetuity. But those details have yet to come forward. So even in an issue like this, where fortunately I was able to get it only so far, again, without intervention, I have not been able to move it any further. And this is an ideal time with the state of Florida considering burial laws and having the African American Burial Task Force, and even beyond the state of Florida, nationally, it's being considered as well. However, when it comes to the day-to-day work that is needed to make sure that these sites are recognized, had it not been for FPAN and their ability to willingness to partner with us to see that these sites get added to the site file, I would be utterly lost, as I was for a number of years before this. Let's see if I can get it past. Okay, so this is showing the diagnostic process or the determination of a site. The experts who are at work there have been trained in what they were explaining to us was differentiations in soil patterns and things of that nature that would indicate the probability of a site being present there. And so they were just exposing the upper layers of soils. I'm sure Sarah will be able to jump in later on and just give a better idea of what exactly was happening there. But this was several weeks after we made our first visit. They came back to determine whether there were any burials. They came back in later and did some trenching and said that for the larger part, the burials were probably located in the palmettos that you see there, but we have yet to really make the kind of determination that I think the elders want to see, which is to know definitively the location of the burials. And we've been considering bringing in that ground penetrating radar. However, we have the conflict of the fact that they are likely on private property. And this is going to be a very difficult process to get through if private property owners do not allow us to access their property. We found out during the process that William Jefferson, who you saw in a previous slide, had been a research partner to historian Dr. Carolyn Williams. She is passed now, but she was professor of African American history at the University of North Florida. And one day he just said to me, you know, I think Dr. Williams wrote a paper because I rode with her around to the various swamp towns so that she could document and interview people. And I was like, what? And he went home and he looked through his papers and he was able to find something that is very valuable, this paper called Gathering the Threads, Recollections of the African American Experience of Nassau County. So community engaged research that we have done, I consider what we've done with FPAN to be community engaged, as well as the work we did with the University of Minnesota. that there are some key questions that have to be asked. Now, today I spoke mostly about the burial issue as it relates to land burials, but we do have a couple of instances in which we unfortunately had members of our community to be terrorized and murdered and dumped in bodies of water. We also know that this is an extension of the sad history of my people coming across the Atlantic. And so when I say where we be, Gullah Geechee land and sea, it's taking into consideration that our cultural resources, our cultural stewardship is on the land and on the water, because we have spiritual and emotional ties to both of those instances. This is Queen Quet, of course, again, she's in one of our community meetings, speaking with fishermen with respect to how the climate issue has altered their ability to provide sustenance for their families. And this climate issue, as I've heard so many presentations already from this morning up until this point, does not exclude us, because Gullah Geechee, by and large, would bury near waterways. So that makes those sites very vulnerable when it comes to making sure that we're able to maintain our burial grounds. These are all photos of not only researchers coming into our community, but bringing us into theirs. This was called a research sprint, where we visited the University of Minnesota and were brought into a library where an abundance of technological and other research resources were made available to us, so that we could go back to our community and continue to interact with this team in helping us to do the work that we do to sustain and conserve Gullah Geechee heritage and culture. As I mentioned before, I was quite happy to find out that there are a group of scuba divers whose work it is to recover or dive for the ships that brought enslaved Africans to the Americas. This marine archaeology is something that I was not aware of, and I'm very happy that I came to learn of it. And so we continue to do the work. We're grateful to all of the experts who make it possible for us to have technical resources that we would not otherwise have. And so I'm just so glad to have been asked to make this presentation today. And I am open to any questions that you may. And Sarah, now's the time to jump in there.
Yeah, so well said, Representative Jenkins, and I think you hit the nail on it. How can you abandon something if you don't know it's there? And just speaks so much to the core of what so many of us are sincerely open and ready to realign and to help with, however difficult that might be. Also to say, the turpentine industry was, a huge awareness moment. And I don't know if you're able to stop your share. I'm looking at our nice Tidally slide. This slide, yes. But I think the turpentine industry is something we've known about, and if not had sort of an arm's reach away from, just hadn't really realized until working with you that these are sacred sites to many of the people who lived and worked and died on that land. And that has had a profound impact on many of us who, when we see a cat eye in the woods now, it's such a different feeling, just having that context and awareness that really we meant to have all along, and now we have it, and we'll protect and preserve and recognize those sites for what they are. what you said about trigger objects or about the bulldozer. And I was thinking of that earlier this morning, you know, these tools for excavations, you know, we have a pretty normalized feeling when we're looking at them until they're in the wrong place. You know, seeing a shovel in a looted site, it feels like a dark object, like a Horcrux. Seeing screens where they're not supposed to be. And I cannot even appreciate or imagine how that feels to see those bulldozers there and to see them as a symbol that they have become. So I think a couple things, you know, FPAN has our racial equity and social justice action plan, and we are going to be following up more on how to put that into action. That we've been doing a lot of work, doing a lot of listening, but we need to work even harder to make it those changes visible and to make those changes and just to keep those ongoing discussions. So I thank you for mentoring me as you are meeting with us very frequently to talk about these sites and what it takes to get in the room together. And we could talk about that maybe in the Q&A, but I so appreciate you sharing what it took for you to get there to this thing and just having that feeling. You know, it is almost a spiritual feeling when you know you need to get in that room. And I've had that feeling a couple times of like, I don't know why, but I need to get there. I need to be there. I need to be in the room with these people, and wanting that to continue for us. We need to get in the room. We need to get there, and so appreciate that you did. And we can really learn from you too of how to make that easier to connect. And something you talked about last week were protectors of our heritage, of your heritage, of the communities we go to, not just showing up saying, we're here, ready to help, but how to identify those protectors of heritage, such as yourself, and just honoring. I don't really know what you do in your full time, because I see you dedicated to this 36 hours a day, and just want to thank you for the work you do for your community, and really thank you for spending time talking with us today.
Sure, thank you very much.